Lenten Weekday Scripture, Part 1. Lent is a kind of 40-day retreat of prayer and spiritual reflection in preparation for Easter. The weekday Lenten scripture readings are a rich treasure in which to immerse ourselves and listen attentively to the voice of the Spirit. These readings were the original Catechism of the Catholic Church. It was only centuries later that the Catechism became what it is today, with its emphasis on doctrine.
Originally, catechesis was more about living the faith than knowing the faith. It was based on scripture, not doctrinal teaching. Selected for the Lenten weekday readings were what the Church considered the most important passages that a new Christian needed in order to practice the faith. In ancient times, the catechumens, those receiving instruction in the faith in preparation for baptism and admittance to the Church, would gather in the cathedral each day during Lent, where the bishop would instruct them to use the scripture readings.
The Lenten readings include the story of Jonah, the story of Susanna, the 10 Commandments, the Lord's Prayer, the parable of the prodigal son, the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, parts of the Sermon on the Mount, the 2 great commandments, the Last Judgment, Matthew 25, and many other favorites, including hopeful passages from Isaiah and Ezekiel. Themes of God's compassion and our duty to the poor are repeated throughout Lent.
On Thursday, after Ash Wednesday, Deuteronomy asks us to choose life, and Luke's Gospel speaks of the death and resurrection of Jesus and our call to follow him. This is the big picture for the disciples of Christ.
On Friday, Isaiah tells us that the fasting desired by the Lord is releasing those bound unjustly, untying the thongs of the yoke, setting free the oppressed, breaking every yoke, sharing your bread with the hungry, sheltering the oppressed and the homeless, clothing the naked when you see them, and not turning your back on your own.
On Saturday, Isaiah continues with calls to remove oppression, false accusation, and malicious speech, and to bestow your bread on the hungry and satisfy the afflicted. This is followed by the call of Levi, the tax collector, in Luke's Gospel, where Jesus must defend himself for eating and drinking with tax collectors and sinners.
Thus begins Lent with key themes of the Gospels: the death and resurrection of Jesus, the call to discipleship, and special concern for the hungry and the poor.